Hey everyone, in this lesson we're going to be learning how to graph circles and roses using our polar coordinate system. So our first problem that we're starting off with is r equals 2. So theta is going to be what we're plugging in, r is going to be what's coming out. So if I plug in 0, r is 2. If I plug in pi over 6, r is 2. If I plug in pi over 4, r is 2. Starting to get the picture? So let's graph that. So 0, 2 would be right here. Pi over 6, 2 would be right here. Pi over 4, 2 would be right here. And we would continue to follow that all the way around. And notice we get a circle centered at the origin. Now, what happens if it's r equals 4 cosine of theta? So this time we'll actually be plugging in values and figuring out what comes out. So cosine of 0 is 1 times 4 is 4. So 0, 4 is our first point. Cosine of pi over 6 is square root of 3 over 2. Now, square root of 3 over 2 times 4 becomes 2 square root of 3. 2 square root of 3 is approximately 3.5. So at pi over 6, we're at 3.5. So far, that's kind of what we've got. Then at pi over 4, cosine is square root of 2 over 2. Square root of 2 over 2 times 4 becomes 2 square root of 2. And the 2 square root of 2 is approximately 2.8. So at pi over 4, we're at 2.8, so somewhere around there. Okay, pi over 3, cosine of pi over 3 is 1/2. 1/2 times 4 is 2. So at pi over 3, we're at 2. Okay, and then at pi over 2, cosine of pi over 2 is 0. 0 times 4 is 0. So we're back to the origin here. Then 2 pi over 3. Cosine of 2 pi over 3 is negative 1/2. Negative 1/2 times 4 is negative 2. Now in our last lesson we learned how to graph with negative r values. So we're going to go to that angle 2 pi over 3 and then we're going to flip it over and go out to 2. Okay, then we've got 3 pi over 4. Cosine of that is negative square root of 2 over 2 times 4 is going to be negative about 2.8. So pi over 4, negative 2.8, somewhere around there. Okay, and then 5 pi over 6, cosine of 5 pi over 6 is negative square root of 3 over 2 times 4 is about negative 3.5. Then cosine of pi is negative 1, and negative 1 times 4 is negative 4. So we're back to the beginning. So notice we have a circle. Okay. Then r equals 4 sine theta. So here we go. If we plug in 0, sine of 0 is 0. 0 times 0 is 0. So we have a point right there at the origin. All right. Sine of pi over 6 is 1/2. 1/2 times 4 is 2. So far, this is what we have. All right, pi over 4. Sine of pi over 4 is square root of 2 over 2. We learned from last problem multiplied by 4 is 2 square root of 2, which is about 2.8. And then pi over 3, sine of pi over 3 is square root of 3 over 2 times 4 is 2 square root of 3, which is approximately 3.5. Sorry, this gets a little messy there. All right, and then at pi over 2, sine is 1. 1 times 4 is 4. And now we're at the top of our circle here. All right, and then this is going to be symmetric. So if I plug in 2 pi over 3, the sine of 2 pi over 3 is square root of 3 over 2 times 4. That's going to be about 3.5. Then at 3 pi over 4, sine of that is square root of 2 over 2 times 4. That's about 2.8. Then at 5 pi over 6, sine is 1/2 times 4 is 2. And then at pi, sine is 0. 0 times 4 is 0. So we're back to the beginning. So let's generalize what we just did. So in general, when r equals just some number a, the figure is a circle centered at the origin. Okay, And whatever your r value is, if r equals 2, that's your radius. All right. If r equals a cosine of theta, the figure is, again, a circle with the center on the x-axis. So we'll take a look at that real quick. Go back to my cosine example. Notice that your circle has a diameter of 4, which was the number in front of our cosine, and it's centered right there with 2 in the middle. So it's centered on your x-axis. And then finally, if the r equals a sine theta, the figure is, again, a circle, but this time it's centered on the y-axis. And notice that, yes, we're centered on the y-axis. My diameter, again, is 4. Half of that is 2, and that's where our center is on the y-axis. All right, so now we're going to graph our other type of figure for today. So we're going to start with 0. 2 times 0 is 0, cosine of 0 is 1, and 1 times 2 is 2. Then we've got pi over 6. So when we multiply pi over 6 times 2, that gives us pi over 3. The cosine of pi over 3 is 1/2, and 1/2 times 2 is 1. So at pi over 6, we're at 1. So far we've got that. At pi over 4, when we multiply pi over 4 times 2, we get pi over 2. Cosine of pi over 2 is 0, and 0 times 2 is 0. So here we are. Now pi over 3, when you multiply that by 2, you get 2 pi over 3. And cosine of 2 pi over 3 is negative 1/2, and negative 1/2 times 2 is negative 1. So at pi over 3, we're going to go, remember, over into the other quadrant that's opposite of quadrant 1, which is quadrant 3, and we're going to go to 1. Okay. Now we've got pi over 2. If we multiply pi over 2 by 2, that gets us pi. Cosine of pi is negative 1 times 2 is negative 2. So pi over 2, again, we're going to flip over. So that'll put us right there. Sorry that that's a little funky looking. All right, now let's move on to 2 pi over 3. So if you multiply that by 2, it becomes 4 pi over 3, which is in the third quadrant. Cosine of 4 pi over 3, again, is negative 1/2, and negative 1/2 times 2 is negative 1. So again, we'll reflect from the second quadrant to the fourth quadrant. So there is our next point. Okay, then we've got 3 pi over 4. Multiply that by 2, you're going to have 3 pi over 2. Cosine of 3 pi over 2 is 0, and 0 times 2 is 2. No, whoops, I'm sorry. Back up. 0 times 2 is not 2. 0 times 2 is 0. Woo! Okay. Now we've got 5 pi over 6. If you multiply that by 2, it becomes 5 pi over 3. Cosine of 5 pi over 3 is 1/2. 1/2 times 2 is 1. So we're here. Okay. Now we're at pi, but multiply that by 2, it's 2 pi. Cosine of 2 pi is 1. 1 times 2 is 2. All right, we're getting there. 7 pi over 6. If I multiply that by 2, I get 7 pi over 3, which is in the first quadrant. And then I'm going to, so cosine of 7 pi over 3 is 1/2 times 2 is 1. So at 7 pi over 6, I'm back to 1. At 5 pi over 4, cosine, times 2, 10 pi over 4, give me 5 pi over 2, cosine 0, 0 times 2 is 0. Hopefully we're starting to see something form here. All right, I'm going to make another table here, continue my table. So now I'm at 4 pi over 3. If I multiply that by 2, that becomes 8 pi over 3, which would be in the second quadrant. So this is going to be a negative value. It'll be -1. So at 4 pi over 3, -1 puts us out here, or over here, I should say. And then our next angle would be 3 pi over 2. Multiply that by 2, it becomes just 3 pi. Cosine of 3 pi is -1, so we get -2, which will put us up here. Okay, and then we've got 5 pi over 3. Multiply that by 2, it's 10 pi over 3. That's going to put us in third quadrant where your x value is negative. -1/2 specifically times 2 is -1. So at 5 pi over 3, we're going to reflect over, so we're over here. At 7 pi over 4, we multiply that by 2, becomes 7 pi over 2. Cosine there is 0. 0 times 2 is 0. All right, and then 11 pi over 6, multiply that by 2, becomes 11 pi over 3. That's in the fourth quadrant where cosine's positive, so it would be 1/2 times 2, which is 1. And then if we do one more, so 2 pi, full circle, multiply that by 2, you get 4 pi. Cosine of 4 pi is 1, times 2 is 2. And there we go. So we have this neat looking rose shape here. All right, so here's our next one. R equals 3 sine of 2 theta. Whew. All right, so 0, multiply that by 2, you get 0. Sine of 0 is 0. So we're starting right here at the origin. Pi over 6. Multiply that by 2, you get pi over 3. Sine of pi over 3 is square root of 3 over 2, and then you're multiplying that by 3, which is approximately 2.6. So pi over 6, we're at 2.6, so somewhere around there. Okay, at pi over 4, multiply that by 2, becomes pi over 2. Sine of pi over 2 is 1, times 3 is 3. Okay, at pi over 3, multiply that by 2, that becomes 2 pi over 3. Sine of 2 pi over 3 square root of 3 over 2 times 3 is approximately 2.6. So we see, again, some nice symmetry here. At pi over 2, you multiply that by 2, you get pi. Sine of pi is 0. 0 times 3 is 0. Whee. Okay, so we've got our first petal here. 2 pi over 3, multiply that by 2, that's 4 pi over 3, where sine is negative. Square root of 3 over 2 times 3 is going to be negative 2.6. So at 2.3, or 2 pi over 3, we're going out negative 2.6. Okay, at 3 pi over 4 times 2, that becomes 3 pi over 2, which is -1. Sine of 3 pi over 2 is -1, times 3 is -3. Okay, you can probably figure out where the next one's going. When we plug in 5 pi over 6, we're going to get out -2.6. When we plug in pi, 2 times pi is 2 pi. Sine of 2 pi is 0. 0 times 3 is 0. Okay, now we're on to 7 pi over 6. So multiply that by 2, that's 7 pi over 3. 7 pi over 3 is positive in the first quadrant, so square root of 3 over 2 times 3 is positive 2.6. So somewhere around there. Sorry, there we go. Then we've got 5 pi over 4. So multiply that by 2, that's 5 pi over 2. 5 pi over 2 is at the same place as pi over 2, so sine of that is 1, and times 3 is 3. We plug in 4 pi over 3. We're going to get out 2.6. And if we plug in 3 pi over 2, multiply that by 2, you get 3 pi. Sine of 3 pi is 0. 0 times 3 is 0. Okay, one more set here. So 5 pi over 3, if we multiply that by 2, that's 10 pi over 3, which puts us in the third quadrant. So sine is negative, so this is going to be negative 2.6. So that's going to put us about here. Okay, and then we've got 7 pi over 4. Multiply that by 2, 7 pi over 2. 7 pi over 2 is at the bottom of your unit circle. So -1 times 3 is -3. So right there. And then 11 pi over 6 is going to put us at -2.6. And 2 pi times 2 is 4 pi. Sine of 4 pi is 0. 0 times 3 is 0. And there is our rose shape. All right, one more example. So we've got 0. 3 times 0 is 0. Cosine of 0 is 1. 1 times 2 is 2. All right, pi over 6. Multiply that by 3. You get pi over 2. Cosine of pi over 2 is 0. 0 times 2 is 0. So this is kind of funky. It would curve up a little bit, but then it'd come back to 0. All right, pi over 4 times 3 is 3 pi over 4. Cosine of 3 pi over 4 is negative square root of 2 over 2. Times 2 is just going to be negative square root of 2, which is approximately negative 1.4. So at pi over 4, we're at negative 1.4. Okay, at pi over 3, multiply that by 3, you get pi. Cosine of pi is -1. -1 times 2 is -2. So we're going to do that right there. Okay. At pi over 2, multiply that by 3, it's 3 pi over 2. Cosine of 3 pi over 2 is 0. 0 times 2 is 0. Okay. Then we've got 2 pi over 3. If you multiply that by 3, you get 2 pi. Cosine of 2 pi is 1. 1 times 2 is 2. So I've got this. Okay, and then we've got 3 pi over 4. Multiply that by 3. That'll get you 9 pi over 4, which is in the first quadrant, positive. Square root of 2 over 2 times 2 is square root of 2, which is 1.4. Somewhere around there. Okay, and then we've got 5 pi over 6. Multiply that by 3. You get 5 pi over 2. Cosine of 5 pi over 2 is 0. 0 times 2 is 0. Okay, then we've got pi. So that becomes 3 times pi is 3 pi. Cosine of 3 pi is -1. And 2 times -1 is -2. So that would put us back to where we started. So we actually can stop there. All right, so let's generalize this. So if for r equals a sine of n theta or r equals a cosine of n theta, here's what we've got. If n is even, you're going to have 2 times n petals. So say your n was 2. 2 times 2 is 4. We had 4 petals. Same thing with this one. 2 times 2 is 4. We had 4 petals. If your n is odd, you're going to have n petals. Sorry, hold on one second. So again, n is odd, you have n petals. Just like our last example, our n was 3 and we had 3 petals. So that is graphing circles and roses.